homemaker has the ultimate career. All other careers exist for one purpose only, and that is to support the ultimate career. So that's all of the careers. So even your job is there to support the home. So I think maybe your priorities still in tier 2 refer back to tier 1. You're not going to upset that career. You could upset that career if you just didn't like it and you didn't need the money and you're independently wealthy. What does it matter that you're serving in the community as opposed to working at that place? And McDonald's says you can no longer flip burgers here. You say, okay, cool. I'll just go and do what I'm doing. Unless you had an ultimate career you were supporting, a household, some tier 1 relationship that you had to serve and were requiring to serve it in a given way. The safety of that ultimate career is that's what identifies your priorities and how well you treat anyone together in tier 2. We're ready to talk.
We're ready to rock. Yeah, just kidding.
The funnest thing.
All right. So
we're talking about communities. Service to community. See if we can get to tier 3. See what that means.
Okay. So I was listening to the other episodes.
To what we've talked about already.
And I think that you and I are still disconnected on what it means to be in a community.
Okay.
I think it sounded like you were trying to just make it be a flat classification with no meaning, like no emotions and responsibility don't they don't define these communities. It's just like your nuclear family, your at-home family is in your tier 1, and then your neighborhood and your extended family, not your neighborhood, your extended family and your church community are in tier 2.
Yeah, your church community, your neighborhood is tier 2. I mean, anything outside of that tier 1, but you're indicating that you'd like to have some definition of
a community
closeness,
maybe
of responsibility and expectations, that you hold that different level rather than just the status. I think I am viewing it just clearly as it's a status. It doesn't matter the relationship you have with any of these individuals. They're in that tier because they're that far away from you.
Yeah.
But not necessarily relationship wise, just that far away from just status, their status in your life.
Okay.
Rather than their closeness in your life.
Status. Yeah. So.
And I think that's where we talked about before, someone being farther from you, an uncle you never talked to is farther away, but he's not
farther away from you in your community.
He's not in a different status. Yeah, he's not in a different status. He's still in a, you don't have any responsibility or expectation of him, but he's still an uncle. He's still in that status. So I think I do just like to identify it as a status as opposed to a relationship.
Okay.
Or a relationship strength, I think is what you're talking about. Is that right?
I think so. I think that's a good way to put it. Strength of your relationship.
Yeah, because it's not the people closest to you. That strength, it doesn't matter how strong it is or how weak it is. Your neighborhood is still the people in your neighborhood. The church community is still the people in the church, whether you ever talk to them or not.
Right.
They still are associated with you because of the church. The people that you went to high school with are still that class, that status, because you were in high school with them, even though you'll never talk to them again.
Right.
If you do run across them, they say, yeah, you're from my high school.
Okay.
Or my college, you're an alumni of the same college I went to. And you have an affinity, a status with them because of that.
All right. So give me a quick and dirty of tier 0, the primary, the 0th tier, not the primary.
Yeah. So to kind of review everything, the 0th tier is all the cells in your body.
It's yourself.
The self, the thing that your identity, your consciousness.
Okay.
The 0th tier is any individual, And the unit you can't break down any further. If you break it down any further, it dies.
Okay. And then what is in the who is in the first tier?
So the first tier that's the nuclear family. We've described it, but how you describe that as status. They live in your same household. People in your same household, because we did talk about mother, daughters, or
roommates,
just roommates that have that first tier, people that you're primarily associated with and I guess that does have a longer time during the day.
Okay, say more about that. What do you mean?
More responsibility with the first tier. So the first tier might have, in order to qualify for that first tier, you'd have to have more expectations and responsibilities, because that's what identifies your nuclear family or your first tier people. Your first tier people are those, that may be the definition, not just necessarily nuclear family, but it's those that you hold the highest level of expectation and responsibility for and with.
And it doesn't matter where they live? Like they could be not living in your home, and yet you still have, so like say...
See if we can you come up with an idea of what that would be? In the animal world or in the human world?
Let's see, imagine if you're like the primary caretaker for somebody, but you don't live with them. Okay, so I'm imagining.
So you're living somewhere else, but you're caring for your mother at her house.
Right.
You're not in the same household, but you're there 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. It's kind of your work. It's what you take as your full responsibility. Yeah. You expect them to keep breathing, and you have a responsibility to feed them.
And they need you. They can't survive without you.
It's a reciprocal need. How do you say that? Responsibility?
Reciprocal. Like, what do you mean?
So they need you and you need them. The same thing.
Well, how would you need them, though? Like in that specific situation, if you're caring for an elderly parent or grandparent, that's your full-time job.
What are your needs for them? If that's what you're doing, you're the caregiver. You're going to be there. You need them to keep breathing. That's the only thing. You need them to respond to you. Yeah, you're caring for them as long as they're alive. If they are no longer alive, then you no longer have that primary relationship. That's no longer a tier one.
So it's not that you need them, it's that the relationship needs them.
For the relationship to be in that status, yeah. Well, you need them. That's why you're your caregiver anyway. And maybe they have Alzheimer's and they don't really know you.
Yeah, but without.
And let's say they're in a facility that's providing them most of their care, but you're playing the role of the nurse, so you don't have to pay for that daily person to be there with them. You're going to be there with them, but they're getting their food and everything from the facility. There's probably an arrangement that if they needed 24-hour nursing care, you can provide that for 10 hours a day, and then the nursing staff covers it for the night, and you get a lower cost because of that. But still, they're part of your inner circle. If you can keep them in your home, you would have them in your home. You'd have them closer to you.
Okay. So where they live then doesn't really matter.
What about just BFFs?
Uh-huh.
You're the,
you spend all your time with one person, and
yeah. We talked about the teenager that didn't want to be in their family's house, but they've got a BFF out there. They got a friend that they hang out with, and they do things every day. They both live at their own houses. They're being provided for that way. They consider themselves separate from that, but they consider themselves together as we do everything together. A platonic relationship of those
Is
two.
it plutonic or platonic?
Plutonic. Platonic is geological.
Is it?
The plate tectonics. Platonic.
No, hold on a minute.
Maybe it is plates. It's plutonic, meaning no sexual relation.
Okay, so you're wrong.
Are you sure?
Well, I mean,
I'm wrong.
Word confusion.
You dare.
Platonic versus plutonic.
Say,
Platonic generally refers to non-romantic relationships. Plutonic, a common misspelling of Platonic, refers to either geology or relates to the Roman god Pluto.
Really, it's Platonic.
It is Platonic.
How come I would ever know that?
Okay,
Cool.
so that's the first thing we learned today. No, just kidding.
Yeah, the only thing I will ever learn.
Platonic. Okay. No, where were we? The train has fallen off the tracks. What are we at?
No, it's just so that does have so your tier one is what you were talking about when you first started. It is a relationship feeling. It's how close they are to you based on expectations and responsibilities.
Okay.
That's your tier one.
But then if that's
it
what
could.
tier one is, then you could say tier two is less of that, right?
Right. Anyone less of that in their segregated communities. I think you do have to separate those ones because you have your family members as opposed to your fellow alumni from your schools or your work partners, people you work with. They're all different from you. They're segregated in their relationship to you.
Right.
The people that you serve with on the volunteer committees you're serving on. So the only time you meet with those people is when you're in that activity.
Okay.
So between 1 and 2, 1 has to be met. So the 0th tier has to be met. The needs have to be met before tier 1, before you can really serve and be in a tier 1 relationship. You have to have your personal needs met. You have to be alive and functioning well enough to do that. Tier 1. So this is the supposition we talked about a little bit. Tier 1 has to be functioning well enough for you to do anything with tier 2.
Yeah.
If tier 1 has needs that are excessive, you're going to drop all of tier 2 and stay with tier 1 until that's cared for enough so that it's stable and secure, and then you can move to the tier 2.
Yeah, and that's the reason we're trying to figure this out, is because
that's what we're talking about.
What do you need to do closer to you before you can go farther away from you?
Right. So
further away
priorities, identifying, prioritizing what you're doing, what your day is, what your connections are, who your connections are.
Community priorities. Yeah.
Yeah. Priority community service. In order to serve with that community, with those segments in tier 2, any of the segments in tier 2, tier 1 has to be comfortable enough to let you out. If they're not comfortable enough to let you out, you're going to call tier 2, like we said, and say, I'm not going to be there. Sorry. No reason. I'm just not going to be there. And so that's what you do. You make sure tier 1 is safe and secure. And then it doesn't matter between the segments of tier 2. If your volunteer boards you're serving on or volunteer commitments that you're with, those groups, if they're not happy with you, you can still go and be a part of the church and be a part of your workplace. If your workplace isn't happy with you, they're writing you up and you've got pink notices and you're going to be fired in a week. That doesn't affect your high school relationships or anyone else in that tier 2. So there's no other connections I'm proposing between those.
Okay, so the segments of tier 2 are church, neighborhood, your volunteer work groups, your pay for work groups, like your career,
and any group you happen to be a part of, alumni association, or what, if you're a military, you're always once a Marine, always a Marine.
Okay.
So,
and they don't have any expectations of you that you need to do before you do anything with the other segments of that tier.
Right. So that's my thought. Is it true? Is that correct?
Well, okay. So if you're spending a lot of time with your church and you're not getting your employment work done, then you run into issues there.
So as far as prioritizing, you need to balance those priorities as well. You can't just.
Yeah.
Well, no. C.S. Lewis's quote. He's got a quote about homemakers. I had it just pulled up on my phone the other day.
Well, search it out.
It is the homemaker is the ultimate profession. Every other career is built to support that. Something. Yeah, let's find it.
Okay.
It's homemaker cloak. The homemaker has the ultimate career. All other careers exist for one purpose only, and that is to support the ultimate career. So that's all of the careers. So even your job is there to support the home. So I think maybe your priorities still in tier 2 refer back to tier 1. You're not going to upset that career. You could upset that career if you just didn't like it and you didn't need the money and you're independently wealthy. What does it matter that you're serving in the community as opposed to working at that place? And McDonald's says you can no longer flip burgers here. And you say, okay, cool. I'll just go and do what I'm doing. Unless you had an ultimate career you were supporting, a household, some tier 1 relationship that you had to serve and were requiring to serve it in a given way. The safety of that ultimate career is that's what identifies your priorities and how well you treat anyone together in tier 2.
Okay, I kind of got lost in there.
Okay. Priorities. The employment doesn't have anything to do with the service or opportunities you're doing, or with your high school reunions or things that are happening.
Because
you're not making decisions based on my workplace that I need to do this, or based on my participation in the band. I'm not stopping my work.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
so
you
maybe...
do do that, but you do that only as it relates to your household.
Right. So maybe it's not employment, it's workplace. Workplace is different than employment. Employment is the work that you do, and the workplace is the people and the place that you do the work with and at.
Okay, and why would you define it differently that way?
Because you have to do, if your livelihood depends on you doing the work, that's almost a tier 1 thing that you do. Like you're doing it for tier 1. It's a responsibility for your tier 1 community. But then there's, after work parties or hanging out with your coworkers because they're coworkers and you just want to make sure that you're happy at work. That's a tier 2 community activity, because those people aren't really in the people and the place are in tier 2, but the work that you do is for tier 1. Does that make sense?
Right. So they become relationships in that tier 2, as opposed to where you're not really serving those friendships, supporting the ultimate career, supporting tier 1. The friendships aren't necessarily supporting that unless they're networking connections, and you've got to do it for that purpose. So that makes sense.
Okay.
The other tier, the other segment's church, the church segment. You're not there. You're there for a relationship with God and for worship, perhaps for friendship. And so there's just an affinity with those people. You have no real requirement to be there. You're there because you want to be.
Right.
If your family doesn't want you to be there, if your tier 1 doesn't want you to be in that church, you have a choice. You either stay in the church and break your tier 1, or you stay with your tier 1 and leave that
find
church.
Another way to worship. Now that brings up another
way that's appropriate.
Question is, where is your relationship with God? If you have a belief in a God, is that a tier 1?
Yeah, is he tier 2 or is it tier 1? If you happen to be Moses and God is your only friend because you're exiled from your country and you're out here with in the desert, he wasn't completely by himself. Or Job was completely by himself for a while. Everyone was railing against him and he was the only one. It was he and God. But he had his friends, he had his family. His family all died. His friends were trying to tell him to curse God and die. But he decided to stay with was that a tier 1 relationship? And can it be a tier 1 relationship with your personal relationship with God? And can that supersede the family?
Yeah. So I've seen diagrams where they have a triangle, and at the top of the triangle is God, and then in one of the corners, the lower corners, is family, Is that correct?
Yeah, it was the husband and the
Husband
wife.
and wife. Okay. So the triangle is
Yeah.
husband and wife
And the closer
God.
you get to God, the idea of that triangle, the closer you get to God, the closer you are to each
Yeah,
other.
and that is a
The further away you get to God, the
isosceles
further away you are
triangle,
from
right?
each other.
Because
Yeah.
if it was a right
Or
triangle,
any,
then you could bring two closer together, but the other one could stay further apart, further away. Yeah.
no, a triangle has only three sides. If it were a square, you could stay the same distance or further away with a parallelogram, but with a triangle and the two dots getting closer to the third dot are always going to get closer to each other. There's no other way to do a triangle.
Now, think about a right triangle where you've got a 90-degree on one side.
A right triangle, a 90-degree angle, and then a hypotenuse between the edges. So you're going to say the corner of the right triangle is one person, the bottom of the hypotenuse is the other, and God is on the top of that hypotenuse line.
That in a right triangle, that top dot can stay really far away, and the other two can come closer together. So, I think it's an isosceles triangle is where each side equals each other. Each side is the same length, and so if you reduce the length of one side,
So
then the other
what you're
sides
saying
have
in a right
to
triangle,
reduce.
in a right triangle, one of them could be really close to God, and the other one could be really far away with the right triangle.
Right.
Really far away from God.
Right.
And you're still in the same triangle. But if the one gets closer to God, that doesn't necessarily bring the other one closer.
Yeah. So the aim is
In a isosceles triangle, if one gets closer
than the other ones.
Well, it's just angles. I mean, you still both have to get closer together to make it.
Yeah. So the aim is that you want
Because
an
it just
isosceles
adjusts the
triangle
angles.
relationship with God and not a right triangle relationship with God, right?
Maybe.
Okay.
Because the angle changes. If the right triangle, say the guy on the right triangle adjusts, it's gonna make it not a right triangle anymore. If the other one doesn't move, it's still gonna skew that triangle.
I think we have to be in person to look at this in order to understand right triangle.
What you're talking about.
Because
okay.
I think
So you need to learn your math is off.
No. My math is correct. Your math is off.
You're completely right. I'm the one that's not seeing it right.
It's just that we're not understanding each other. Maybe we're both right, but we just have to be able to see it.
Right. Okay. Well, and that's not.
It's not important.
That's not it.
Right now.
The importance of that is the relationship with God. We're trying to identify, is that tier 1 or a tier 2? Is God a tier 1 with us or a tier 2?
Or maybe some people might say
tier 2.
It's a 0th tier thing. Like it's your overall health depends on a relationship with God.
So, and let's just say God is that ethereal spiritual thing. It's our soul, our spirit. Our spirit, in some status, they say return home to God. You're going to just return to God and be part of God when you die. So there's some spiritual thought along that line as you just become, you're rejoined to God. So your spirit is God in you. So that would be the 0th tier, if God is in you.
Right.
And that may be true in almost all religions. You feel that if your personal relationship, it's an internal thing. It's a spiritual connection. And that's what supersedes, that's got to be correct before you can even participate with your tier 1 relationships, is be somewhat secure in your spiritual connection in your 0th tier.
And it is a religious idea. If you are not a religious person, is it still true?
If there is no God,
yeah,
you still have a spirit.
Spiritual health.
There's still some force operating your body besides your consciousness. So if you don't consider that's God, if that's nature, if that's evolution, if it's just something that's keeping your heart beating, your autonomic nervous system, you got this thing in your head that's making things keep working, and it's just something in your head, but it's not conscious. You have your conscious self, and you've got that thing that's keeping you alive.
Right, and we had talked about consciousness and subconscious and unconscious.
Right.
And I don't think that the matter is settled on that still, but
probably not. We're not going to settle anything.
All right, but
but you still talk about
Yeah.
it. So I don't know. I'm thinking that God more relates to the 0th tier.
Okay.
Like you said, it's each individual's, because in your first tier relationships, you could have any number of individual relationships with God. There's 4 people in there. You could have 12 different relationships with God.
Right.
On different level. Because you're deciding, you're still an individual with all this. You're taking your 0th tier into the 2nd tier and operating. So the simplicity, I think tier 1 does make sense of where it is.
Which is people.
Your church, your church relationship isn't God. That's just your sociality. It's where you're deciding to worship with your religious friends.
Okay.
Like those people you have an affinity with. It's not a direct, even if there are covenants involved and you're agreeing to do these things specifically with that group of people, and your life is based on that philosophy and mindset, it's still not God directly.
Okay. All right. So
So the 3rd tier, I really want to identify beyond the 2nd tier. So the 2nd tier are those things you can choose. It's your you're prioritizing what I want to do.
And that's the communities that you're choosing activity in.
That you're a part of. You can choose to be a part of.
Like you can play chess by yourself at home.
So are there...
And that isn't a tier 2 thing. It's just a thing you do.
Well, it's your 0th tier. By yourself is just you. With your family, you can have dinner together, and that's a tier 1, having dinner together.
But when you choose
tier
to
2
do a
would
chess
be...
club outside of your home, then you turn that activity into a tier 2 activity.
Or if you invite other people into your home, it's a tier 2 activity, even though you're in the location, but you're doing it with people that aren't in your tier 1. And your tier 1 would have to say, yeah, it's okay, you can bring your chess buddies over. Have a chess tournament.
So that's tier 2.
If they say no, definitely not tonight. You're not doing that tonight. Then you have to find some other place to do that chess tournament if you're going to do it.
Okay. Tier 3.
Tier 1 is responsible for getting you to tier 2. Is there anything that you associate with in tier that you can't choose to be a part of?
In tier 2, you said?
Yeah, in tier 2. Are there things... Well, I'm trying to define tier 3 by the question.
Okay.
So are there things that people do that they didn't choose to do?
Well, one that's coming into mind is, like, if you're a kid in a religious household and your parents make you go to church, you don't really have any choice not to do that. I mean,
if you're made to go somewhere, so the same kind of thought. If you're incarcerated or if you're coerced to do something, if you're coerced, then it's not something that you would call a tier 2. It's not something you're doing because you enjoy it. The kid at church isn't necessarily worshiping. He's just going because mom made me go.
Okay.
That's why I'm here. And the person that's in prison did something to earn that prison sentence, but they're coerced. They're required to stay there in that facility. It's not that it's their first tier.
They would choose to not be there if they had the choice.
So, and if they were going to live their life the way they prioritize their life, they wouldn't be in that situation.
Right.
Possibly. Now, there's possibly some people who just love it in prison because you have no responsibilities.
Maybe. So does that answer the question, though? Does that fit in the tier 2 activity that you didn't choose, or tier 2 community that you didn't choose to be a part of?
If you didn't choose the community, tier 2 is kind of described. Those are the things you want to do. You need permission from tier 1 to get to. You don't need permission if they put you in jail. Someone else is taking authority and saying, we don't care what your tier 1 says. Who cares that you're the breadwinner in the house? You did this. You deserve to be in jail. You're going to jail. And you got either 30 days or you got 30 years, depending on what you did. Tier 1 has no control over that. Your 0th tier has no control over that. God has no control over that. If there's something that they incarcerate you, they incarcerate. Even if it was, let's say you were just in South America and you were picked up by a cartel, and they put you in prison. That's it. You're stuck in the jungle in a prison, and you can't get out. So you're not choosing that. The safety and security of your tier 1 doesn't matter. Your tier 2 relationships don't matter. Your 0th tier, you're trying to stay alive. You're back to just you inside the cell, inside of this incarcerated, coerced situation.
Right.
So I think that's a tier 3 idea.
You think
you don't necessarily have to go through tier 2 to get to it, but it's something that you can't choose. You can't say, no, you can't tell the prison, I just want to live here. Can I come in?
okay.
They won't let you live in the prison if you don't qualify to be there.
So let's see what else is there. If I have a kid, suddenly I'm in a mother community. I am a mom. And
Right.
that means,
Say you didn't plan it. A child comes along in your life and it wasn't planned.
well,
but
even if it
you're going to have a
even if it
child.
was planned, I'm still like, I can't say
You've
I'm
joined the
not going to
community.
be a mom. I have a kid, but I can't say that I'm not going to be a mom. You know, so I'm a part of that
That
community
status,
no matter
the
what.
status of motherhood, even if you adopt the child away, you still have the status of motherhood. You've mothered a child.
Yeah,
You're a mother.
maybe not.
And you're part of that group. You don't necessarily have to do anything with that group, but you didn't. Did you choose that group?
Or if you're a
You
victim
have a
of a
status.
crime,
I mean, just the fact that you went to school. Yeah, a victim of a crime, a rape victim. You're a rape victim. That's part of your mentality. It's part of your psychological dealings in the life for the rest of
can
your
you
life.
choose not to be a part of that community anymore? Like one day you're like, you know what, I'm tired of being a victim, and so from now on, you can, that's a mindset thing where you can say, I'm not a victim. This made me, this doesn't define me as a victim anymore, but that doesn't change the fact that it happened to you.
Right. And I think you're talking about two different things. Yeah, your mindset, even though you graduated from the university, your alumnus to this university, even though everyone hates that university and the town you moved to, you're part of the enemy. You don't have to talk about it, but you don't have to advertise it either, and you probably aren't going to advertise
Right.
it if you're living right in the middle of the rival school.
Right.
And if anyone finds out, you just say, "Can we just keep that quiet?
Right.
I'm not going to make a big deal. Don't make a big deal out of it. I don't want to be hit. I don't want to be beat up." So it's the same thing. I mean, victim status, you can choose your mindset about it, but it doesn't change the fact
That you are a victim of that crime.
that you're right. There was a crime committed against you, and it doesn't have to affect your life. About like the uncle that you never talked to. He doesn't affect your life. He's still in that extended family tier, though.
Okay, so you have an idea.
Your situations, I think there's still too. There's something that happened. They didn't happen to you on purpose, though. You didn't choose it, and you didn't have to have tier 1's permission. So that's, I think, a determination here. Does tier 1 have to let you do it, and did you choose it? If tier 1 doesn't have to let you do it, and you didn't choose it, I think that sets it up in tier 3.
Okay, give me
It's something you're just moved
more
to.
examples of what that is then.
This is the first time I thought about those type things, incarceration or being coerced to do something,
Okay.
or part of a criminal, having something enacted upon you that you didn't want, but it is. You just happen to have a scar on your face or a birthmark. You're a kid with a birthmark, so you're one of those. The other thing, and the thing I thought of first that really is that third tier that you can't necessarily choose, you need to be invited to, is political positions. So even joining the city council you have to be elected to certain positions.
Yeah, you won't get elected unless you express your interest in it, though.
Most often, and I don't know, I don't have even the anecdotal experience. I don't have the understanding of talking to a number of people as to whether they were asked to run. I think most people that run are asked to run, as opposed to saying, "I just want to be the president of the United States, and I'm going to push it until I get there." But you succeed at one thing. You're popular, and your work environment is good. You do well in your career, in your tier 2 stuff. And then people around you start saying, you should be our congressman. You should be our governor. We need you as governor. And that's what gets you to start thinking about it. You really probably don't have any ambition. Donald Trump, maybe he likes to do what he's doing, but he says, I'd rather be somewhere else. I really would rather not do this. But there's problems that I need to solve, and I know I can solve it. And I'm here. If you guys would elect me, I'll be happy to do it.
Okay.
And Kamala, she went on her public service. She says she's always been employed by the people. She's never done anything on her own, never created any corporate anything. So been an employee of the state, and then went on to, in order to get from the Attorney General of California, someone had to suggest you'd be great to go to the Senate. We need someone as a senator, and we can support you.
Yeah, and this is what you're assuming happens. You haven't really
right. I haven't
asked anyone.
Talked to her. I don't know, and I don't know any senators as to whether they were invited. J.D. Vance, he mentioned it in one of his interviews earlier. He said he had no intention to be a U.S. senator, but he was doing this work in Ohio, in his hometown. He went down to do those things, and people said, we need you to be the senator. Will you do that? So he was invited to run for the Senate.
Yeah.
And he agreed to it. You agree? Yeah. Okay. I can do that. I can dedicate my life now to that. But you got someone like, who has no chance of being elected? Kanye West running for the president. Didn't he run that the last time around?
There was a little bit of a campaign going.
Yeah. And he may have said, a publicity stunt. I just want to be the president. I think I can do great.
Yeah.
Or someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger, he decided to be the governor of California. Maybe he decided to do that, and maybe he was invited. I don't know. Maybe Kanye was invited to run. If you or I wanted to run for president, we could go through and get to 10,000 votes in each state, or whatever it was that RFK said he had to get on the ballot. Yeah. You could do that. You get enough people, you could pay for it, or but you need a group behind you to pay for all the people to go out and get those signatures. Somehow you've got to get the signatures.
You've got to have support.
It's so large that if you did try to do it by yourself, I don't think it could be done.
Yeah.
Even if you're a billionaire.
Okay.
So it's something you need support to do. You need someone inviting you to that level, to that arena. In order to serve the government, you have to be invited to that. I mean, staff positions or cabinet positions or ambassadorships, those things that are handed out by presidents or by governors, you're appointed to a council in the state. You're appointed to that council. You don't say, let's just build a council and I'm going to be the leader of it. Or I'm going to go be the ambassador to China. You don't volunteer.
Right. Is this the same?
You're asked.
Do you think this is the same? No. This is the same. This is the same as how they do it in churches. I mean, well, okay. So in the LDS church,
I don't know about churches. Yeah, in
the LDS church, if the higher,
in the LDS church, even the bishop doesn't say, I'm volunteering. I want to nominate me.
Right. But I think
you don't nominate.
Is there the chance, like in other denominations, they go to seminary and they go to religious training school and then they apply for the position?
Then they apply for the job. You apply for the pastor position in a church.
Yeah.
And then the board of directors of the church. But the board, I think, the chairman of the board of that church or the trustees, whoever's running that church, making a decision on who their pastor is going to be. Well, like the Boy Scouts, the board is invited. So the people that actually run it, that are making the decisions, they're not volunteering to say, I'm going to be the chairman of the board of the church.
Okay.
People are invited in. It's just like the band, any
nonprofit,
any board, a nonprofit board. You're invited onto that board for a purpose, for a reason. And if you do your job, then maybe you continue to advance and maybe some other bigger board picks you up. But You can't say, I want to serve on a corporate board and be paid $50,000 a year and apply for that position. You have to be invited to a corporate board for a paid position.
Yeah.
And that's based on what you've done in the world and how valuable you might be to that board and what that company is doing. Whether the chairman and the board members that are already there invite you to a corporate board. And even if you founded the corporation, you're not necessarily going to be the chairman of the board.
Right.
And they can kick you out like they did Steve Jobs. He founded Apple Computer and the board exited him. So you can't choose it when you get to a certain level. You don't choose your tiers. And so that's what I say is tier 3. There's those things. And church callings. The Catholic Church operates on that same thing. You can be a priest and find a place to serve, but they call you into the position. And you can't apply to be a Monsignor. You're called up from the priesthood to be a Monsignor and a bishop,
right,
up to the Pope. And the Pope is selected by a group. He doesn't say, I'm going to be the Pope.
Right.
So you're called into those roles of service. And that's the ones you're called into or coerced into. And maybe it is a coercion. You don't turn down a calling to be a Monsignor in the Catholic Church. You don't turn down a calling to be the stake president or an apostle or a 70 in the LDS Church. You're called. You can make mistakes and get kicked out, but you can't. And I guess you can decline to move to level 3, but you can't get to level 3 because you chose it. You can't say, I'm now an area 70 for the church, and I'm just going to visit all the places, and the bishops are going to have to recognize me because I say I am this position. I'm smart enough for it.
Okay, so are you saying level 3 does have some activity associated with it? It's the service. This is all service. This is communities that
it's
you
still
can
community
serve.
Service.
We're not talking about communities
Right.
that you're just a part of and nothing is happening, right?
Well, no, even those, like your alumni, what you're an alumni of, your university, you may not serve it. You're serving it because you're there.
Uh-huh.
Motherhood, you're always in motherhood category. And that's one that you didn't select. You selected your university. You didn't select motherhood. You didn't select that you are an ex-con. You did select it. But the fact that you served prison time, that you were required to do that, no one had to agree to do it. People had to agree for you to go to college. People probably had to agree for you to be a mother. So that may be tier 2 still.
What else can you be? Well, anything that you do, any service that you do, you agree to do it. Like you can choose to not do it, right? Any service
Right.
that you have an option to do.
And if tier 3, let's say tier 3 invites you to go, and you say, I'm not going. I'm not gonna go be political. So they're inviting you to a political service in tier 3 that you had to be invited to and elected to, and say, no, I'm not gonna run. Then you just don't go there. You can't be there if you didn't run.
Okay.
So you had to put your name in the ballot, and people had to elect you in, even though, you look at this current election with Kamala Harris, and she wasn't elected by the people specifically, but the whole convention ratified it and elected her. So she still received the nomination, and however that occurred.
Right.
So she's invited to be there, and she's there. It's legitimate.
Is there a tier 4? Do you think?
And what could tier 4 be if there is one? The tier 3 is what you're invited to, or what you're coerced into, or what you.
I think we need more examples for what's in tier 3, because I still don't understand, what are you coerced into?
You're coerced into prison.
Well, yeah, but
you didn't choose to go join prison.
You chose to commit the crime, but you didn't choose to
Right.
be committed to prison.
Right.
And
potentially or you didn't even commit the crime, and you were put in prison in a foreign country and inappropriately, and you're innocent, or you're innocent and they just convicted you, and 30 years later they're going to find out that they convicted you wrongly and they release you. You still were there in the tier 3 service without your choice and without the approval of your the tiers below it. And maybe that's it. The tier one has to agree to join the tier two, want to be with the tier, want to be outside in tier two. Tier one could just live with tier one. A zero tier could just be he's individual and never open up, be a hermit, never open up to tier one. So you're choosing that. Are you forced into tier one? Children are when they're born. An adopted child or a child in foster care is forced into a tier one.
Right.
They have no choice in it.
They're
it's
coerced.
Their careger.
They were coerced into that.
So children are coerced into a tier one, and then you have the choice whether you want to stay with it. So maybe we talked about that with tier one.
I would say children generally
tier
have no choice in any of the communities that they're a part of.
They're coerced to join all of them.
All of their...
Unless they want to be in the band or they want to be an athlete.
Yeah.
It's possible the parents say you're going to be a golfer. No matter what, you're going to be a golfer.
Yeah, there are exceptions, but generally parents choose what's good for their kids or they can say you have to do a sport, but you can pick which one. And so they're being coerced into a sporting community.
Into activity. Yeah. Or you're going to go to my alma mater. You're going to Ole Miss. It's just what happens.
Yeah.
You can't choose anywhere else.
Right.
Anything beyond tier 3, though, I don't think there's anything people do. So the question is there anything, anywhere people are that we can't identify as zero at their first or second tier that they're choosing, or third tier that they were invited into or coerced to be at? Is there anywhere else people can be? Any other realm of existence? I don't think there is.
You think about this. Okay, so I'm gonna name a community, and you tell me which tier it's in.
All right. See if you can find.
So, your quilting club. What is that?
A quilting club, a humanitarian project that you're doing with a number of women that you're quilting with.
Yeah,
and you're making quilts.
Maybe you're not making quilts for anyone else except yourself, but you just
not
like
humanitarian.
To quilt.
You're just in a quilting class or a club that tries to increase their skill.
Yeah,
that's got to be a tier 2. You're selecting to be a part of that club, that group. So a group is in tier 2, clearly.
Okay. What about?
And it's not your tier 1. I don't think anyone there could claim that as a tier 1 because you can't full responsibility. You're not going to have full responsibility and expectations of your quilting club partner. A dance partner, you might. Let's say you're a dance partner. You and your dance partner are ballroom dancers, and you're competing for some of the larger awards, going to all the nice shows. That could be a tier 1 relationship, even though you're totally platonic, not married, and you're both just zero tiers operating on your own. But that dance is your whole life. It's your career. It's everything.
So would a performance music group or a competition music group be a tier 1 thing when you're depending on the other people?
Could it be a tier 1? Yeah, the tier 1 is where your primary relationships are. If that is your primary relationship. Do we know any groups that have done that have just been the Beatles? Were the Beatles just the Beatles? Or did they have lives outside of that group? Was that a tier 2 group that they sang with? And certainly when they started breaking up and changing things. But during their building years, where they were out every night and every day, they were probably the only ones they talked to.
Yeah.
They were doing 3 or 4 shows a day all over England and gained notoriety.
Right.
And that's all they did. They wrote and they did that. But then they got to the level that they all went off and developed their own tier 1 after that. So it probably was a tier 1 for a while, that they decided to leave their family, leave their required tier 1 position as children, and say, we're going to create this, and we're going to be the 5 of us together. Is there 5 or 4? It's just 4 people.
Yeah.
I think.
So then, okay, so in how about drum and bugle corps? where in the winter there's not much activity, but in the summer they travel and they live with each other in hotels and dormitories and whatever, and they spend nearly all of their time rehearsing and performing and competing. Is that what tier
Are
is
they
that?
paid? Are they paid enough? Are they paid enough to compete?
They,
I mean, like,
from what I
are they on the same
understand,
level as the
members
Beatles?
of these corps pay to be a part of it. They're not paid.
Okay,
Like the group is probably paid. I bet the group is
so
paid, but they
it's like the dance team or a ballroom dance. I mean, they probably don't have ballroom dances all year, but there's a season. So if there's a drum bugle season, it's possible that some people would say, this is my whole career. You know, an independently wealthy person who didn't have to serve a tier one anywhere else. They're the zero tier. You're caring for yourself, and I can work enough outside in my hermitude, being a zero tier, that this is my only first tier. So it could be a tier one. It could be, but necessarily it's not. It's most likely a tier two.
okay.
Any group you can join is most likely a tier two. A dance team, I mean, a ballroom dance team, you and your partner are most likely tier two partners.
Even though there's
It could be
very
tier one.
high expectations and responsibility for a time, it's likely just tier two.
Right. And that depends on if you have a tier one that's allowing you to do that dance partnership.
Okay.
If you're just a zero tier and that's your only tier one, you could term that could be the tier one. But if you're married or if you have kids, then your kids are going to say, yeah, Dad, you can go and dance. I'm okay. We'll be fine at home. So
Okay. How about your political party?
being a Republican or independent, that's an affinity with the group. Yeah, that's a tier two affinity. You can choose to be involved in it, or you can choose just to be a named alumni or a named member of that group. You're on a list. The group will call you, and it's possible, since you're on the list, that the group will call you and say, we need you to be, maybe enough people know you that say, we want to bring you to level 3 in the Republican Party and let you be a precinct committeeman. We need you to serve as that position for us. So you can be called to that and it could be a tier 3.
But if
No,
they ask
your
you
Republican membership isn't there. If they ask you to step up and do something, then that becomes a tier 3 step up.
yeah, what if you decline?
Then you didn't step up.
Right.
Yeah, it's still
But
tier
you're
3.
choosing.
You're agreeing not to serve that tier. Yeah, you're choosing not to serve that tier. If you you can't, and I guess, well, no, you still can't. You can say, I want to be precinct committeeman. You go to the meeting and you say, I want you guys to vote for me for precinct committeeman. You're holding up your hand saying, I'd like to be this. They have the choice still to invite you in or not. So most likely you can be that if you choose to be that. Precinct committeeman, the lowest elected level in the party, in the Republican Party. I don't know how the Democrats operate with it. In the caucus system. So that's the lowest level elected position. You're just elected by your neighborhood group to serve in that position, and then you get to go to the state convention and you're electing the state delegates and things like that. That's where it starts. And then you got to start talking to people that care about that level, and then they might invite you to a higher level. And all of that invitation is a tier 3. But there's nothing else you can do that's beyond those. People don't exist in anything outside of something you're invited to or coerced to be in, or that you choose to be a part of and are supported in by your tier 1. So I think it ends at tier 3. And tier 3 includes community or city, county, state, national, worldwide government, worldwide invitations, ambassadorships, things like that. Or if you're going to be on the UN councils, you have to be invited to those councils. Or part of the Bilderberger Society or the Illuminati. You don't just go and join, apply to the Illuminati or the Bilderbergers. You're invited into those private societies that run the world, or the Rothschilds family. You can't go and be part of their group.
Okay. Tier 3 is invitation only.
Yeah.
Um,
Or private clubs, country clubs, many country clubs. You can't just go join. You have to be sponsored in to the country club
right.
by someone that invited you. Uh,
And tier 2 is,
Things that you can move in and out of fairly easily, and that you need to have a strong tier 1 in order to do. Well, really, the invited into political positions, you still have to have a strong tier 1 that's supporting you doing that.
maybe your tier 1 still has to support you no matter what. No matter what other
Right.
outside tier 2
Well,
and tier 3.
that's
you need
right.
them.
Even if you're incarcerated, even if you're going coerced to being in prison, your tier 1 can continue to support you in prison, or you can break that tier 1, and then you lose the tier 1 because you went to prison for this heinous crime that now we can't have you as part of us anymore. Okay.
So I think
So tier 1 can exist in all the other tiers, and it can only exist. I think the only way it can exist if it supports the other tiers that you're serving. Otherwise, you break that tier.
Okay. So are you saying you can have tier 2 and tier 3 with a broken tier 1?
Yeah, if you're invited to tier 3, you have to be invited to tier 3. But wherever you're serving, you can serve there. You either have the support of your tier 1 or you agree to break it. I think that it's a priority thing. I think that this is more important. So I'm going to break examples of that. You have an example of that? We never hear about Napoleon's wife or Hitler's wife.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, would going to prison break your tier 1?
It's possible that it could. And that's what I say. If you committed a heinous crime enough that the family, your tier 1 relationships, because we no longer want to expect anything from you or require or be responsible for you anymore. You're done. So you're out. And then they become an extended family or an ex-family. I guess your ex-family would go into tier 2 as well. You're always part of that community. This is my ex-wife and ex-children.
You're a part of it.
They're now stepchildren of someone else, and she's a wife to someone else, and I'm just here in this 3rd tier prison until I can get out.
Yeah, just because they have a label. Because if you never talk to your ex-spouse ever again, you never see them, you never talk to them, you never associate with them.
Think of them, even if you never think of them again.
You never think about them again.
They're still status.
They still have that label.
The status is still there. Yeah.
So like all of my ex-boyfriends are in my tier 2 community.
Yeah, all 7,000 of them, however many there were. Yeah, right. All of them.
Yeah. I think
they're part of an affinity group.
My ex-boyfriend's on 2 hands. Maybe less, maybe 1 hand, actually.
Yeah, probably 1 hand. So you're always part of that. You're always associated with that, an affinity group. And those are all level 2 because it's something you experienced. So if you were coerced or you were, I think level 3 is just that thing that you didn't choose. And I think that's the only way it exists. You can't just go and be employed as a state senator even, or as a county clerk. You can't go be employed as the elected county clerk or county recorder. You have to apply for that and be elected into it, or a sheriff. You could be a deputy sheriff, be hired as a deputy sheriff, but you can't be the sheriff unless the group elects you to that post.
Okay, what about the polygamous community in southern Utah, where the prophet chooses his polygamist wives and they're coerced into it, and yet they still have all of the tier 1 responsibilities?
They're raised in that. So the wives are raised in that. When they reach the ripe age of 13, they get married to the 80-year-old prophet.
Yeah.
However it goes, however it works. In that society, are they all tier 1? So the question is, are they all tier 1? All 20 wives and
even though there was coercion,
70 kids, are they tier 1 or are they tier 3 group? Well, So that would be the question: is the child that a birthed child in a household, are they a tier 3 child until they can make a choice, until they're conscious enough to make a choice that I want to be tier 1 here, or I want to step off somewhere else.
Yeah.
The parents are saying, you're tier 1 with me, until the child can say, okay, I'm tier 1 with you. Mom, I still like you, even though I can think now by myself. I think I'm going to stay in your house.
Yeah, the nature of being a minor implies that you are coerced into every like I was
Right.
saying about sports, you're just coerced into the communities that you're
Yeah.
in.
And so they're in a tier 3 relationship. They didn't choose it, and they were elected. They were volunteered or coerced into it. So children, minors they're not in a tier 1. Well, yeah, the tier 1 is the people you're closest to. But there's a tier 3 aspect to that, a non-elected aspect.
Right.
Or a non-chosen aspect.
Non-chosen.
So maybe we all start in tier 3. We were thrown down here on this earth as a baby, totally dependent on someone else in a prison. We had no way to figure out how to move it. And then we finally learned how to lift our head, roll over and crawl. And then we could walk in our little prison. And then at some point we gained consciousness and brought it to a 0 tier, or tier 1. I don't know, maybe that's too convoluted. What purpose would this type of concept hold?
Yeah, I think convoluted is maybe a really good word for this
Description
whole
of it.
thing, because
this whole idea
still doesn't make sense. It's still like it's not clear. It's not simple.
Is there any practical use for defining the 0th, 1st, 2nd, 3rd tiers of living, of service?
Yeah.
Any practical reason for it?
So I imagine one reason why someone would want to know this is they feel like they deserve permission to participate in tier 2 and tier 3 activities, and someone in their tier 1 is refusing to accept that they have any right at all to be outside of tier 1 right now. Like, you're not fulfilling your tier 1 responsibilities and expectations, and so you can't be spending time in tier 2 at all. I think it's the permission and support part. I think maybe you just need to you need to define tier 1 and tier 2 as a priorities thing, right? Is it?
What's a priorities thing? Yeah.
It helps
and
you
it's whether you
place your priorities, is if you know what's in tier 1 and what's in tier 2, and you can clearly place the line for that, then it'll help you make decisions on priority, right?
Right. The person inside tier 1 can see that's the person that wants to live in tier 2. Let's say that person just wants to live in tier 2. I just want to be able or whatever in tier 2. But tier 1, if you have it defined and you know where the lines are, tier 1 says, here's where you've got expectations and responsibilities inside this tier, and you're not meeting those, and you're choosing that's your tier 1. So it's all the choice. Yeah. So prioritize, and that's what maybe this helps in divorce law or mediation somehow to define these lines.
Okay.
You have some responsibility and expectations out there, but there's this primary expectation and responsibility. You chose that first. It's the ultimate career. You chose to support the ultimate career by having that career. So if that career is all that important, you have to break your support of the ultimate career.
Right.
If you want to call yourself out. So it's divorce and mediation. Maybe it just helps define where that is. And what they talk about skeletons in the closet, if you're invited to tier 3 and you've got skeletons in the closet, things that you did bad in your tier 1 or some of your tier 2 activities in your life, and those come out, that you're just whatever, an ex-con, you're a convicted felon. So you can't really serve in tier 3, perhaps. unless the conviction was a sham.
Right. Now, you gave me a paper, and I misplaced it. I don't know where it is, but you drew what your idea of these communities were months ago. I think maybe
You
they
have
might
it.
have
You have it in your. I messaged it to you. I sent it to you. A picture.
Yes, you sent it. So you didn't give me the paper. You just sent me a photo of it.
Yeah, you've got the picture.
So.
And I can find it and send it again.
Oh, I'm sure I can find it.
That's the only thing I have as far as the delineation or a representation of what.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. So what you had written down, tier 2, work, extended family, hobbies, church. Well, this is tier 2, right? That's okay. Adult children
around
volunteer and charities. Tier 3 is city, county, nation, state, international,
and then also prison, or coerced positions.
And the closer, then would you say the closer the tier is to you, the more responsibility you have to it? You have to meet those responsibilities before you can move out into the further tiers. Is that?
Well, and I don't know. I think tier 3, you have to succeed in tier 2 before you'll be invited to tier 3. That was my point. You either have to succeed to get invited to the elected position,
right,
or you have to completely fail tier 2 to be coerced into the prison systems in tier 3. You can't voluntarily move into those elected positions or voluntarily move into prison unless you break tier 2, something in tier 2.
Okay.
And you can't live completely in tier 2 unless you break tier 1. Yeah, that may be a delineation here.
Okay.
If you want to live completely in work or in your hobbies, the only way to do that is to break tier 1 to get there. You have to break tier 1 to get to the prison part of tier 3, or to break tier 2 somewhere. But you don't have to break tier 0 to get to tier 1. Maybe you do, because tier 0, you're agreeing to join a second tier. You're agreeing not to be a hermit, not to be alone.
Okay.
No man is an island. No man stands alone. So you're part of a group. You're choosing to be a part of a group, or you're choosing to stand alone. So you're breaking the tier 0. You're saying, I'm no longer just me. I'm part of a group now, and this is tier 1. This is my tier 1 family, and this is my identity. And when you do get elected into a state position or nation, you do break tier 2 as well. You break you can no longer be employed as the manager of McDonald's if now you're a state senator. Well, you can. You can do that as state senator. You can't really do that as the national senator. Some jobs are full-time jobs,
right,
that you're elected to, like the sheriff. If you run for sheriff and you get elected sheriff, even though you've never been in law enforcement before, you can't keep your other job. You have to go and be the job of the sheriff.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's really hard to find a clear line between this tier 2 and tier 3. I mean, you can say you choose to participate in tier 2 activities, and you get invited to tier 3 activities, and still there feels like there's some tier 3 activities that you can choose to do or not. Or, I mean, well, you get invited to them, and then you can choose. Then you have the choice. But
yeah, the choice to accept it, or to accept the nomination. Someone nominates you or invites you to run. You can choose to run or not.
But I wonder if you can line up your life and try and hit as many goals as you can. Like, you're attempting to become president of the United States. As a kid, you're like, I want to be president. And then they say, well, you need to get a degree at
you
college.
Start following.
That's step 1. And then if you serve in the military, that'll increase your chances. And I mean, you have all of these things, these
make
check
sure
boxes.
You're fully involved in the party, and that you're serving on all these committees, and you get to know these people. These are the important movers and shakers that you need to know.
And
so call them up, visit with them. They'll buy them lunch. They'll be happy to.
Right. Yeah. And eventually enough people are going to know you and see how much you care about this, that it's possible you'll get invited to run as the president.
Right. And
But
Yeah,
that's a series of choices that you have to make. I don't think that you can accidentally do all of the things. Can you accidentally do all of the things that would qualify you to be
George Washington?
Qualified? Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. To be called up to a position like that.
Yeah, maybe you can.
You do. You have to do that. You have to be that type of person. Just like someone called into a church service. You know, you can't call someone to be a general authority in the LDS church if they're not stable and sufficient.
Yeah.
You don't call people to be stake presidents unless they can afford the 10 years service time that's required to be a stake president.
Right.
Or in the stake presidency even. They have to be stable career. They have to have their tier 1 solid, and tier 2 has to be solid so that they can do that church service on tier 3. Especially in that case, because you have to keep your tier 1 and 2 going. You're not hired on full time. And even if you do have a stipend, if you're called as a mission president, you receive some pay for that, or if you're called as a general authority and you receive a stipend and you're paid for that position, you're still maintaining tier 1 and tier 2 if you happen to write books and stuff. I mean, you're still operating.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure that I have much more time to figure this out.
I think that's all we do. The only value we have with this tier system is to be able to delineate it, identify it. I don't know that there's any practical purpose for it.
Yeah. I think there is a practical purpose. I think it can help straighten out your life. I think
help with priorities.
Knowing that you have a tier 1 that you can disrespect by moving into tier 2 when your tier 1 isn't healthy or happy or supportive. Right. I think knowing that can help you lay out, wait a minute, where do I really want to be spending my time?
Right. If your aspirations are tier 3, you could be breaking everything. You may not make it if you don't keep a strong tier 1 and tier 2.
Yeah. And it's just another way to help become a more effective you.
Right.
It's just not clear enough. Like, we can't write a book off of this yet. It's not simple enough.
Well, and I think it's simple enough. We don't have the practical reason for it yet. What questions does it answer on its own?
Yeah.
You build a chart. You build a chart. You build a chart in order to answer questions, to be easily seen.
Yeah.
So it needs more thought on that, but at least this is the first start of it.
Yeah.
Figure out if that chart can be useful somehow and somewhere, and what question is that answered? What questions it helps answer? Prioritization.
Right. Well, I think
helping
the more that we read,
mediation,
and the more that we talk to other people, I think that'll become clear.
Yeah. And welcome other input to this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Better let that go.
All right. That was really fun talking about all of that.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.